This is a very, very long story that started when I was about 11 or 12, around 2003. Don't get me wrong, at some points I thought I was insane, but the events that transpired over the years rid me of all of my doubts. I realized that my experiences started out innocent enough. It revolves around what I thought were just two ghosts. Over the last few years, though, I realized that they were not human. I have visited professionals and learned that nothing could be done at this point. I have accepted the consequences of my childish actions and naivety back in the day. It has changed my life in a lot of ways, both positive and negative. This story's pretty ridiculous, so fair warning. I don't expect people to believe it. This is the first time I've shared this. Only a few people know of it and have seen enough to believe me. I think I wrote this because, well, I don't really want to hold it back anymore. It's now a part of me. Do I recommend using a Ouija board? No. But if you end up in a situation like this, hopefully you can learn what to do when you're faced with a potentially dangerous poltergeist. Now it's up to you, the reader, to decide if this is fact or fiction. This started back in 2002 or 2003. I was at an age where I was starting to watch those ghost reality shows. Every Friday night they would run from 8 p.m. to about midnight. The lineup always ended with "The Scariest Places on Earth." That show absolutely terrified me. But these shows sucked me in and I was completely fascinated by them. I had always heard of ghosts as a kid and these ghost shows gave me nightmares, but I couldn't stop watching them. I told my family about what went on in the shows and they didn't believe in such nonsense. Now, let's fast forward a bit. My uncle had visited a few days that year and he was a believer in the paranormal. He was looking around the house for a Ouija board, and I don't think he used it, but it was located out in the open. I'd never seen one before, and I'm honestly surprised that none of the shows that I watched used one. My grandma explained how it worked, and moved the planchette around a little bit. She made it talk. I realize now that she was moving it on her own accord back then. Like my parents, she didn't believe in such nonsense. Still, the thought got me really excited. I thought, hey, maybe I'll see a ghost or find out if my house is haunted. I desperately wanted to talk to a ghost, so my sister and I started using the board. Nothing. We tried for 3 days and nothing happened. On the last day, the planchette went to goodbye. We put the board away for a week or two after that. The room we used the board in started changing slightly. There was always a black shadow in the room, standing by the window. There was also an animal spirit that had randomly started showing up, a little black cat that ran around the house. Sometimes at night you could feel it walking around on the bed. I'd always think that it was one of our cats, but I never saw anything. My room shared a wall with the master bathroom, and all night the shower door would loudly open and close when everyone was sleeping. Sometimes it even happened earlier in the evening. My sister had also heard this on multiple occasions when we traded rooms for fun. I kept watching for the shadow. It always vanished when you'd look directly at it. I started talking to it on a daily basis. I'd say hello or wish it a good day. Well, when I knew no one was around to hear me. The daily greetings actually made it start to talk to us on the Ouija board. The entity introduced itself as Spirit. It said it didn't remember its real name, which we later found out was a lie. It told us all sorts of things, that it wasn't an evil entity by any means, but there were bad things out there. That he had been a teacher and had died of old age shortly after he lost his little cat. He said he was buried on the property. We couldn't believe that we had made contact with a spirit. When friends came over, we introduced them to this entity. We talked to it all the time. Looking back, something strange is that it would follow me. If I went to another house, it would be on the other end of that board. At that age, I couldn't get a job, so I took babysitting classes. After that, I was allowed to babysit some kids that I had grown up with, who were like family. Those nights were always fun. The parents often got home really late, so I was allowed to sleep over. Normally, I slept in the basement. It was on one of those nights that I first encountered the poltergeist. It was a terrifying experience. At about midnight, this ghost started walking around on the main floor. I listened to it for 2 hours. Eventually, I turned off the computer and it stopped at that moment. It was really scary as I didn't know what I was dealing with. I was just a kid after all. This was the second ghost I made contact with. At home, we continued to use the Ouija board. A few times a week at most, I'd say. We didn't use it every day. Being kids, we did play outside a lot. When we did use the board, Spirit was always ready to talk. Pretty soon, weird things started happening to me. I began to trust the ghost we called Spirit. Out of the blue, I'd hear it talk, even when I was at school. He was a male, and he introduced himself again, like he did with the board. The communication was very different, though. It made me question my sanity. I was having conversations in my head. I didn't have to talk out loud. Spirit said he appreciated that I would wish him a good day each morning. He felt it was the right time to actually speak with me. He wanted to prove that I wasn't crazy and manifested as a mist at home. At one point, he locked a door that had no lock. So yes, I believed he was real. Eventually, the second spirit came into the picture. My sister and I brought the board to our friend's house and we talked to the poltergeist. Unlike Spirit, this ghost was not a kind individual. It spelled out swear words. We didn't know that we weren't supposed to let the ghost write these out. We got the ghost to tell us its name, Javella. Over the course of the next few months, I slept over now and then. One night, while I was babysitting, I woke up from a dead sleep. I heard a whisper right next to my head. It said, "Mine is a touch." I didn't know what that meant at the time, and I still don't. There were 2 other people in the room when this happened. I could hear someone or something running through the hall upstairs. I heard items falling, and the back door opening and slamming shut. I wondered if the parents had come home. Not even 2 seconds after the back door slammed, I heard the front door open. I could hear the parents' voices as they entered the house. That was the last time I encountered the poltergeist at that house. Instead, it started appearing at my house. To be honest, I didn't even notice at first. It sounded like a child when it ran through the hallway. Anyway, the poltergeist followed me, even as I babysat in different homes. Javella tormented me a great deal, unlike the kind spirit I was talking to. Sometimes, after the kids were in bed, it would stomp up the stairs in the basement. It would start from the bottom and stomp up to the top over and over. I would lie on the couch watching the hallway. Each time it got to the top of the stairs, I could hear bare feet on the tile floor. Those nights made me stay upstairs, terrified. I knew it wasn't an intruder. This wouldn't happen at my home, but I did see it physically manifest in the kitchen one night. I had just gotten home from a babysitting job, and I would normally get a drink of water when I got back. I poured my water at the counter. When I turned around, I saw the face of a child no more than a foot away. It kind of resembled those scream masks people wear on Halloween, but it was all flesh. The face looked like it was melted. The child just stood staring at me with an expression I couldn't make out. It was like a mixture of pain, depression, and anger. I know that normally when people tell stories about this kind of encounter, the figure just disappears after a moment, but this one didn't. I don't know how I managed to walk around it. My courage was definitely tested that night. During these events, I would often seek advice from Spirit. Eventually, he told me his real name, Camney. At one point, since I trusted him, he made a proposition to me. When the time came for me to die, he would wait for me. His reasoning was that he had no family in the afterlife. I agreed without a bit of hesitation. Years went by, and Javella seemed to lie dormant. I took on a real job before high school, and at night I became a little restless. I wanted to take long walks, but since it was so late at night, I just paced around the kitchen brainstorming. The kitchen is connected to a hallway that leads to the front door and upstairs to my bedroom. Anyway, at the time, I didn't realize I was in the poltergeist territory, and the pacing was pissing it off. After around a month of this, Javella snapped. At the time of this event, I was 16 or 17 in grade 12. I had stopped using the Ouija board years before, around grade 10. One night, I was pacing and listening to music. For one reason or another, I removed my headphones and I heard a strange noise by the front door. It almost sounded like someone was dragging a body, and it was absolutely terrifying. I couldn't see what was at the end of the hallway as it was dark, and the sounds just wouldn't stop. I had to get by whatever was happening down the hall, which was still going on after 5 minutes. I put my headphones in, cranked the music up, and ran. I bolted up the stairs and ran straight to my room. I thought this would be the end of the ordeal. I wish. On the next night, I kept an eye on the time. When I first heard the sounds, I had looked at the time. They started at 11:40 on the dot. I didn't want to take any chances, so at 11:30 I went back upstairs. Getting ready for bed, I was standing next to my bedroom door. Suddenly, the door handle started shaking violently. After the shaking stopped, I heard the dragging sound right next to my door. It went on for 10 minutes. I didn't know what to do, and I was completely terrified. The next day at school, I was dead tired as I had barely slept. This was on a Friday, and I worked mornings on the weekends, so I didn't pace that night. I went to bed early, but I still couldn't sleep. When 11:40 hit, I expected something to happen immediately like it did the last 2 nights. Nothing happened. 10 minutes of silence went by, and then I heard a click. I wasn't sure what to make of this sound. It started happening every minute or so. I got up and turned on the light. I wasn't too worried because I thought that maybe the cat had gotten into my room. I searched my room for a while, but the clicking stopped when I started looking. I didn't find anything, so I went back to bed and turned off the light. A few minutes went by and I heard it again, a bit louder this time. I got up immediately and turned on the light. Again, the sound stopped. This time I started flicking random objects in the room, trying to replicate the sound. I had a Wiimote on the floor and it recreated the sound perfectly, so I stuffed the controller in my clothes drawer. When I turned off the light, I didn't hear any more clicks. After 10 minutes, I heard a loud banging sound coming from the tube TV near my head. It was as if someone had punched the screen. This was one of the most terrifying things that has ever happened to me. This thing was in the one place I thought was safe. I knew it wasn't going to stop and I had to do something. I gathered up what courage I had and I said, "I'm sorry for intruding on your personal space. I didn't know and I promise it won't happen again. Just please let me sleep. I have work tomorrow." I didn't expect a response, but I heard a voice from across the room. It seemed to say a sentence, but I never found out what it said. I asked it to repeat it, but it said nothing. I laid down and the end of my bed dipped as if something sat on it. Finally, I went to sleep. For years, nothing happened, and I never saw the poltergeist again. In 2010 or 2011, I was ready to go to art school. I ended up taking a clay class. For one assignment, everyone was given a 1 cm by 1 cm block of clay. We had to spend an hour making something, and I chose to make a small skull. Around 2 weeks later, the little skull figure was given back to me. I brought it home, and it went missing after a few days. In the beginning of 2013, I started dating my best friend, who I had loved for a long time. We had been friends for years, and we were hanging out together on New Year's, celebrating. He had a couple glasses and stayed the night at my place. We shared our first kiss and cuddled for the rest of the night. I remember seeing a dark shadow standing in the room, never moving, just watching. I don't know if my boyfriend noticed it, but it stood there for about 10 minutes. A month later, I was about to go to my boyfriend's place. He was at my house to pick me up, and I went upstairs to grab something. My family wasn't home as it was the weekend. When I went downstairs, he asked me if there was someone in the kitchen. My stomach dropped and I said, "No." He told me that someone started talking to him from the kitchen. We decided to investigate the kitchen. When we turned on the lights, of course, nothing was there. A few days later, the clay skull was sitting on my bed for the first time in years. I pocketed it and showed my boyfriend later that week. I told him about how it had gone missing. I didn't make any connections between the seemingly dormant poltergeist and the skull appearing. It had attached itself to the skull, and being stupid, I brought it into my boyfriend's home. We knew it was there when we left his room for a few seconds. When we re-entered the room, the skull had been moved. My boyfriend was a Wiccan. When we realized the poltergeist was there, he put a seal on the skull. For those who don't know, a seal is a pentagram or another symbol like it and is supposed to repel spirits. This action sparked up a massive poltergeist attack as it began to manifest. We decided to take the skull to a friend of my boyfriend's who apparently had psychic abilities. I didn't believe in psychics at this point. She immediately pulled out tarot cards and started reading out events in my life that I had never told a soul. At one point, she talked about my dead grandfather and spoke of a guardian watching over me, but she said she couldn't see whether it was human or not. She said it was a warrior. I thought that was weird and remembered the spirit I would talk to as a kid. It had said it was a teacher, though. That night, I reconnected with that ghost. I talked to him for the first time since 2005. I realized that this spirit, who I had dismissed as a figment of my imagination, was real. Better yet, it began to work on helping us with our poltergeist problem. Pretty quickly, we discovered that the poltergeist was named Javella. I'd had a hunch it was him, as he'd been the only poltergeist in my home. Cammy told us how to deal with a poltergeist through the Ouija board. We were supposed to spread salt on every windowsill, door frame, etc. to trap it in the living room. It was difficult to trap it. We can hear and see it moving through the house. Over 3 months, we got used to the poltergeist throwing items, punching things, and manifesting. Camney told us to put the skull in a metal box, fill it to the brim with salt, put seals on the box, and seal it with wax. After that, we were supposed to bury it. He said that this would permanently bind Javella and keep him trapped for an eternity. I thought this seemed cruel, as the poltergeist had yet to cause us physical harm, so my boyfriend tested it with a wooden box. It worked for about a day. After that, the activity worsened. He even got letters from neighbors complaining about the noises it would make. It had tried to break a door down. That was the event that sparked the angry letters. My boyfriend was facing eviction, so I took the skull back and asked Javella to return home. This ended the poltergeist attacks at his place, and things began to calm down a little. We still intended to bury the thing and planned to do it the coming weekend. This sparked the final fallout between me, Javella, and Camney. I only found out about this when I got home late after work. I had left my phone at home, and when I checked it, I found a ton of messages. Apparently, the poltergeist went to the home of the psychic and ran rampant. It was screaming loudly, from what I was told. Apparently, this went on for hours. The messages consisted of asking for Camney's help, who, at the time of the attacks, was talking with me. I didn't realize the attacks had stopped and immediately grabbed that stupid skull and demanded that Javella show himself. He attacked and almost possessed me. I briefly lost contact with Camney. I could hear this entity talking angrily. It said it wanted to continue attacking and that this was all just a warm-up. After a while, it calmed down. After a few days, the attacks stopped and we learned what was going on. Javella was attached to another ghost, a kid who had died in a fire. Apparently, that kid died feeling angry and jealous. This affected Javella and made his emotions go completely haywire. The night he attacked me, he broke free of the child and managed to calm down. Camney was a big enemy of Javella's, and the whole thing was actually an attack on Camney. Camney had used us to help get rid of his enemy. We got really angry when we learned this, because the whole situation could have been avoided. In return for the trouble, the two made up. Unfortunately, it was too late to save my relationship. Due to the stress of everything that had happened, my boyfriend and I ended our relationship after 6 months. Since I couldn't imagine telling people such an unbelievable story, I never provided a reason for the breakup when asked. Who would believe that ghosts ended your relationship? I suppose this brings us to now. I still communicate with Camney regularly. After all that has happened, the door of communicating to Javella has opened up as well. The two have started manifesting more and more often. I've seen full-body apparitions of something non-human on both ends. One entity looks like a rotting corpse. I know this is Javella. The other is the size of a bear, but it stays at a distance. I've never seen him up close. Not long ago, I found out that my sister has been seeing them too. Since we both use the Ouija board to communicate with them, I guess that connection is open to her as well. Looking back at this experience, it does sound pretty crazy. Talking with these things that I'm not even sure are human. Sometimes I still think I'm insane, but things happen when I start to doubt myself. Last month, the bag was shifting in my room at 2 in the morning. Shortly after, the light turned on with a loud snap. A few days ago, the corpse was standing a foot away from me for a good 3 seconds. I've tried to break things off with these ghosts, but no one has been able to do anything because of the deal I made. When you make a deal with a spirit, you can't break it, or so I've been told. To conclude this long story, my childhood wish was fulfilled. I was able to communicate with a ghost.